Welcome to episode 8 of coOperators, our special horror Halloween themed episode. Although it's not really themed, neither Chuck and Dice or I are dressed up. Today we'll be talking about several adventure and horror games that Chuck and Dice streamed recently on his laptop. And we'll also be talking about Virginia that I streamed on PS4. It's very much akin to the X Files, apparently. Pretty weird. It's Twin Peaks too. Chuck and Dice actually has watched a few newer horror releases. One that I'm especially excited to talk to him about is Train to Busan. Yeah, which I'm especially excited because of the concept. But let's start it off. We'll hand it over to Chuck and Dice. He'll start off with his stuff.
Okay. All right. First off, yeah, I am streaming from my laptop now. I'm taking a little break from the PlayStation Network because I don't really have a lot of games that I need to or I have to stream right now, and I don't really collect new games. I mean, I did buy Doom, but everyone's streaming Doom, and no one needs to see Doom over and over again. But
I just want to watch Carl. I just want to watch Carl Urban Doom.
yes, the Doom that ended with a hand-to-hand combat scene. So I decided to stream some of my favorite adventure games for my laptop. Adventure games, if you don't know, are these games that aren't very oriented in combat. They're more like click and point and figuring out puzzles. But these are all these games have a supernatural theme to them or a horror theme. Okay, so the first adventure game I want to cover is 5 Days a Stranger, which was created by Ben Yahtzee Croshaw, who's also the voice behind Zero Punctuation. If you guys watch his actual YouTube show, he's very opinionative on games, but that's his shtick. Also, it's somewhat well-founded because he actually has made really good games in the past with very limited resources. This isn't the case of 5 Days a Stranger. It's a part one of a four-part series of adventure games. Each one getting actually progressively better because he's like learning more techniques on graphics and music, and he's actually having a lot of professionals help him out and such. The concept of 5 Days a Stranger, it's the first part in the Chzo mythos. That's CHZO, kind of like his variation on the Cthulhu mythos that of H.P. Lovecraft fame. So he wrote the story about a gentleman thief going into a mansion with the intention of robbing it, robbing of it of valuables, and escaping with the spoils. When unexpectedly the gentleman thief gets stuck in the house, and the concept is that this mansion is haunted, and there are four other strangers there that also have kind of been stuck in this house, and they have to figure out what's going on and what to do. In terms of gameplay, it's very sort of primitive. It reminds me of something Sierra would do, or even Interplay back in the day when they used to make adventure games. Although, yeah, and I won't lie, the controls are pretty clunky. But what kind of made me stay around was it actually was a really good story about who owned the mansion, this father and his son, and the lineage of where this mansion came from, and why they were stuck in the house. It had these creepily eerie moments that just kind of worked even in the setting of a crudely with crude graphics in an adventure game. um, I mean, you just kind of have to play it, and you have to be in that right mode. You got to turn out all the lights. I'm not saying that the graphics presented are the best. They aren't. They're very, very, like I said, they're primitive, and they have these. They're brightly colored. But he works with it, and for whatever reason, he creates a combination horror slasher genre that you don't really see commonly in on a lot of horror games. Usually, when you do play a horror game, it's some kind of first person shooter, or some kind of zombie fest where you have these sub enemies that you have to take out before you take out a boss. In this game, it's more you have to figure out the mystery of the mansion, and you have to deal with these personalities. There's a guy named Hartley who's a jerk. There's a kid named Jim that looks up to you, and you have to basically use them to help you do these tasks. There's a girl named Simone who's actually a celebrity newscaster who works for the BBC. Who at first is a bit arrogant, but then you start working with her and stuff, and to figure out some of the cryptic history of the mansion. And then there's yourself, Trilby, the gentleman thief, who is thrusted into the situation where he has to work together with people that normally he doesn't do that. He's a loner and such. It's a really interesting game and a really fun start to a ongoing series that continues in 7 Days of Skeptic, in Trilby Notes, and then finally 6 Days of Sacrifice. I'm going to move on to Ben Jordan, Paranormal Investigator. This is done by a guy named Francisco Gonzalez. He now works on a lot of Watch It Eye games, and we'll talk about them in a little bit. But this is also Ben Croshaw and Francisco Gonzalez made these games as hobbyists with this game engine called the AGS engine, the Adventure Game Toolkit, basically. This is a very the AGS engine was created by just fans of adventure games who just wanted to create a network of people who just wanted to introduce that back into the public. These are all free. You can just download them for free, so they don't cost any money, and they don't really take much space in your computer. I mean, adventure games are very tiny in comparison of PlayStation games or computer games of today. Some of these aren't even a gigabyte. With Ben Jordan, Paranormal Investigator, there's 8 episodes of this. Then the first episode has to do with the case of the skunk ape, and it has to do with this guy named Ben Jordan, who's almost like a Hardy Boy-esque investigator, searching for clues and stuff like that. And he's a kid who's just out of college and decided, hey, I'm going to be a paranormal investigator, and this is my dream. He basically goes to different locations, and he actually investigates paranormal investigations that are actually, in a sense, real life theories and such. So, the first one's about the paranormal investigation of a skunk ape in the Florida Everglades. There actually is a legend of a skunk ape, of a yeti, almost like a yeti creature that exists in the Florida Everglades. And sometimes they have to do with creatures, sometimes they have to do with spirits. This one has to do with a skunk ape. I think it's hilarious because the concept of this one is that there's a skunk ape killing people. But then you go to the skunk ape's cave and you find out that there's a stash of cocaine there. And so you have to figure out why he has a stash of cocaine, and you find out that there's a drug dealer basically that lives in the forest, and he actually has the skunk ape addicted to cocaine, and the skunk ape will do his bidding and such as long as he gives him his fix. I'm going to spoil a little bit here, or a lot, because I'm just going to give the ending, because the ending is so freaking ridiculous. So he calls this skunk ape because he eventually has a collar around him that can send an electric charge to him with a remote. And the skunk ape, bursts into this cabin where Ben Jordan is, and Ben Jordan is in the drug lab where he's on one end of a table, and there's a pile of cocaine, and the drug dealer's at the other end. The skunk ape bursts through the wall, and you can't really do anything. This is the only portion where your character can actually die if you don't do the right thing. So he's gonna order the skunk ape to kill Ben Jordan. So as Ben Jordan, you just have to put your use icon on the table, and he flips the table over, and the cocaine just flies everywhere, all over the guy. And the skunk ape goes berserk and just totally consumes the guy, and sniffing up all the cocaine. And that's when Ben Jordan makes his escape, and that's when he basically says to the people that hired him as an investigator that you don't really have to worry about this anymore. Which I don't think that's the case, because there's an ape loose who's gonna eventually run out of cocaine, and then he's gonna be suffering from withdrawal syndromes and probably going to be even more dangerous. Yeah, these are two hobbyist games. Like they were done by just like the design was done by just one person. Ben Jordan has some voiceover work, but he didn't do it. He didn't do that voiceover work until after the fact, and he did a pretty good job. And I'm not saying the graphics are great. Both games are pretty darn short. 5 Days, I will say, is a little harder just because it has very sort of wonky controls. But story-wise, they're very entertaining games, and they actually did introduce like the adventure gaming sort of genre back into the public in a different way that Telltale did. This is more like, I guess you could say, traditional style adventure gaming, not the sort of cinematic that we see. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but like this style, I would say, has a little bit more gameplay and does require a lot of thinking to solve the puzzles. That kind of set the tone for like adventure games in the future. So these hobbyists actually started becoming professionals. For the first, the other game I'd like to talk about is the Blackwell Legacy, which is actually part of a series as well, and it has concluded just recently, maybe a couple years ago or a year ago. But the Blackwell Legacy involves it's created by a guy named Dave Gilbert, and he works for, he started a company called Watch It Eye Games, which have been making a lot of the adventure games that's been coming out. One of my favorite is Resonance, and they also did Primordia, which is about robots, and robots are awesome. The Blackwell Legacy involves a woman named Rosa. And she basically can see this ghost named Joey. And you can control Rosa and you can control Joey. Rosa is the more physical person that can pick up objects and, like, talk to people, while Joey is a ghost and he can't touch anything. But if he concentrates, he can, like, throw gusts of wind. But Joey can always talk to Rosa. So, like, he can investigate while Rosa's talking to a person and find out if that person's lying or if there's any secrets around the room that, Rosa can't see. And that way, you basically can guide her more along her adventure. I was streaming that yesterday night, and the game unexpectedly just crashed on me. But I did have I didn't know this, but there is an auto save on the game that will, save it a couple steps back from, where you last started off. So, I don't have to, like, replay the entire game. I'm probably going to be streaming it later tonight. But, yeah, the Blackwell Legacy goes on for, I don't know, like, I think 4 or 5 games. The first one's pretty short. The other ones are a little longer. I believe the last one is the longest. They're not bad games. They do the typical let's collect everything and start, see if it works with this object, see if it works with that object, which is the staple of all adventure games. But they also have conversation parsers where you can talk to people and you can give them a sarcastic response, you can give them an angry response, and that will actually, like, kind of, basically unlock different attitudes from a person that you're talking to. And you can't go back and do it again, because sometimes adventure games will, like, allow you to just talk and talk and talk, and you can go through the whole gamut of talking.
Now, for those, are you able to, for something like that, are you able to have save states? So, like, let's say the whole time you're like, from the onset, you want to be sarcastic to everyone, just be a complete a-hole. But let's say halfway through it, you realize, yeah, maybe that's not the best idea, because does it lock stuff out if you're a certain attitude?
I've been told that there may be a couple different endings, and depending on how you act, it may affect your ending. But I don't imagine. I don't think the first game in the Blackwell Legacy actually does that. I'm not, and I certainly don't think the last one does, because, like, when you're playing the last Blackwell Legacy game, I'm just gonna say right now, it is the last game. There's no way of them going back to doing any more. They wanted to really end that series. What I think it is just you get a reaction from the character. And that's that your reward is basically, this is how the story is going to present itself. When you give the sarcastic response, you basically want to, I guess it's giving the player the control of what kind of character they want to be. And And I don't think it really has any repercussions really in the ending, other than maybe people will act a tad differently, but you can actually keep on going and playing the game like that. Uh, if you unexpectedly start acting like, I guess, nicer to people, that means that your character just goes through an unexpected change and you're just acting nice. I think it's just a little like it's something fun for you to do, to like maybe change it up a bit. Whereas like say like you're playing I don't know modern games, but Duke Nukem. Duke Nukem's going to be Duke Nukem throughout the entire damn game. He's not going to change. He's not going to suddenly become sensitive unless it's like to some kind of sarcastic response. He's just going to say, "Come get some. Want to dance? Shake it, baby." He's not going to change at all. Whereas like the Blackwell, at least you can have that control of like your character can be shy, she can be angry, she can be nice. It's all up to you of like what kind of character you want to make, and I think that's the beauty of the Blackwell games is that you have that opportunity. I want to move on to Downfall, which is made by Harvester Games, and this is from the UK. And out of all of these games, I think this is kind of one of those top tier adventure games. This transcends the genre a bit. A lot of these adventure games you can like sort of like move, I guess you could say semi 3D. You can move up and down, left to right. You can, they usually kind of give this sort of the room that you can walk in a bit of an isometric view where you can like kind of like interact with items. With Downfall, it's just a 2D space, and you walk forward or backwards, just like Mario. Your up and down are your down is your inventory, and up is basically just use or check or whatever. It's a very simple layout. What Downfall does is that it creates this very dark imagery. Like if you look at this, and this is like the remake of the original game. Downfall Redo is a remake of the original Downfall made a couple years back. It's created by this guy who also created another game called Cat Lady, and Downfall is sort of a pseudo sequel to Cat Lady. It's about this guy named Joe Davis. He's having trouble with his girlfriend Ivy, so he takes her to like a hotel where they can actually discuss it, called Quiet Haven, which makes me laugh because it's basically Silent Hill. And like this hotel is just really bizarre. Ivy disappears, and he encounters this person named Sophie, who basically says, as Sophie's this young girl that says, "You have to kill me and all my memories. There are 4 of us, and you have to kill all 4 of us if you ever want to see Ivy again." And so, like you can control, like Blackwell Legacy, you can actually control Joe's attitude towards things. He can actually be shocked and say, "That's ghastly. I don't want to do that." He can be accepting, say, "Okay, how do you want to die?" And that actually does affect the ending to your game, because there's I believe 3 different endings, and depending on how you react and act, it actually will point you to one of the different endings. And like it can bounce back. Like I've been told that you can bounce back and forth depending on what choices you make. So with Joe Davis, like I guess if he makes like too many like sort of I guess what you consider bad decisions, it heads towards a more somber ending. When I finished this game, it kind of led to just sort of a middle of the road ending. I was trying to go for the golden ending, which apparently it actually shows you how you're rewarded, and it shows you in cat skulls. And I just had 1 cat skull missing, and I don't know what I had to do that, because I haven't found a lot of walkthroughs in this game other than like people doing the playthrough and then finding out that they got the golden ending somehow, but they probably couldn't tell you what it was all about. And I think that's pretty genius, because most adventure games do give you like a running score and points. But in this particular one, they just say it's how you all act. and like maybe you should replay the game and act a little differently. But like that's a heck of a way to make a person replay a game, because it worked for me, because adventure games typically they don't have a much replay value because the riddles stay the same and such. And in this case, at least you have this sort of change in attitude and such, and how you react to people. And it's an incredible game. It's an incredible game about mental disorders. Ivy has a eating disorder. Joe has sort of this separation anxiety disorder with Ivy, because they're married, but like the relationship's not working out, and like it just explores that to high details with everything your characters do and such. Yeah, and like it's a very dark game. Like the only way I can describe it is that it's like a Vertigo comic. It's like one of those Vertigo comic books that you like Sandman or Preacher or something like that. And like the animation is like the sort of paper cutout animation that looks that actually fits with the narrative. The soundtrack is really great. I actually had to cut the sound because I was hit with some copyright strikes. So there's going to be some periods in my playthrough where you can't actually hear the music, but I don't own the game, and I don't have enough money to pay for the license.
Thanks, Chuck and Dice. That was actually that last game you talked about, though. Very interesting. I always like when games. I always like when games don't have these kind of like perfectly wrapped up storylines, or these kind of cookie cutter beginning, middle, end, happy ending, everything gets resolved at the end. But they have these kind of they kind of have these stories of that are a little more. I don't want to say dark and gritty, because that's just been thrown around too much for that past few years with all these crappy movies like Batman versus Superman. But they have these more less kind of less fairy tale kind of fantasy like, and more a bit more in the real world, as far as, and again, I don't want to say that, but I'm sure you understand what I'm trying to say. It's trying to get real. It's a more relatable story. I know we talked about this with something like Gone Home, where another adventure game that was not your typical fantasy sci-fi action. It was more of a more. You think it's horror, but it's more down to earth. Like, it's a more relatable, personable story, and hearing about the characters in your games having these kind of like issues, like eating disorders and separation anxieties, I feel like it makes protagonists a lot more relatable, or a lot more sympathetic, as opposed to the dude bro who like has like 50 guns and has like giant muscles, and sure, there's like one game where he has an emotional side, and he loses his wife, but then now that he's all depressed. I'm talking about Gears of War, which I really fucking hated. And I'm really upset that they made another one. No offense to anybody who enjoys Gears of War, like, that's your thing, but I really, really dislike that series because there's just so much dude bro going on in that goddamn game. But yeah, it's great hearing about games like this. And especially adventure games that are kind of making this comeback. I remember I played... I remember one of the earlier adventure games I could play was they were actually educational adventure games. Like, one of them, you were stuck in the Smithsonian and you're trying to get out, but you had to go through each kind of exhibit and solve these puzzles. So like, you went to the Wright brothers and you had to collect the proper engine, and you had to create like the wing that had the perfect flow underneath it, and it kind of taught you how flight was created and things like that. So yeah, that's awesome. Moving on, we're actually gonna talk about Virginia, which is what I played. I haven't finished it yet. I'm still gonna. I still have. I think not too much to go. I think I'm about halfway, but I will be streaming part 2 either this weekend or during the week. But so Virginia, for those of you who don't know. It's a PS4 downloadable game. Premise is you're an FBI agent who begins an investigation in a small town in Virginia in 1992, actually. So, really bizarre game. Has a very unique art style. I know Chuck and Dice checked out my stream, and he dug the art style, and he called it... What was it you referred it to as?
It reminds me of like, well, how everything's presented because everything's just action. It reminds me of those like old cartoons before they had like voiceover. So it's very expressive in their movement and stuff. And like in terms of like character modeling, it does kind of remind me of like Superman the animated series. Not Batman the animated, but Superman the animated series, where they kind of pared down the lines and stuff like that. But they were able to, with these sort of simple line movements, they could show expression of anger, of bewilderment, of horror, whatever. But yeah, like it's weird. It's like a silent movie almost because there's no dialogue in this entire game.
Yeah, and it's actually like that's one thing that kind of drew me to this is the art style, and also they're supposed to be more story driven and more character driven. Um, as far as from what I played, it's really interesting. There's a lot of quick cuts to it. It's actually pretty similar to it has a lot of quick similar cuts, similar to what we saw both of us saw recently, which was Shin Godzilla. It's got a lot of those quick cuts, and also it also has a very it also has a very Twin Peaks vibe to it. You're going into this small town. There's a diner, there's coffee. Um, you know, buffalo. The buffalo really scared the crap out of me. Um, and it's interesting because it kind of keeps you. It kind of like drip feeds the story a bit as far as the investigation you're in charge of, which is the disappearance of a young boy. So I'm interested to see where it goes. There's not a lot of action. There's not a lot of interaction. It's very much as a lot of people are describing these newer adventure games, it's a walking simulator. So there's a lot of walking, not a lot of walking, but there's just a lot of not doing anything. It's just interacting with things, which again, in the vein of adventure games, if that's your thing, that's your thing. If not, well, you probably better off watching a stream of it. But I think so far it's actually got me really interested to see where the mystery, where the investigation leads, and what is up with the mystery of the red door and things like that. Again, the buffalo really scared the crap out of me. That was really fucking freaky. Yeah. Hope you guys enjoy the stream, and again, I'm really interested to see where this is going. Because the next game I'm actually after Virginia that I'm gonna start playing is Dear Esther. Now, Dear Esther, I was someone actually spoiled the ending of Dear Esther for me a while back, but I don't remember the ending anymore, so it's kind of gonna be fresh. But that's another in the vein of Virginia and things like and Gone Home. It's a very you're just kind of just exploring and it's a walking simulator. You're just clicking things. So
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of mention here, it's really interesting to me that they're making all these walking simulators, and I don't know if they're built for stream because like watching a person play a first person shooter is kind of boring to me because like the end result is like one guy's going to be shooting the other guy, and like if there's no like sort of story connotation, it's just not very entertaining to watch. Sometimes I'll go to a friend's house, they'll be playing it, and like I'll take about 15 minutes, and I was like, hey, are you gonna save? Can we do something else? But like if I see a person like playing something like this, I'll just sit there and watch. I think it's very similar to what I would do when someone played a JRPG way back in the day. I don't know. For some reason, it was entertaining to me to watch a JRPG, something like Final Fantasy 7 or 8. Nowadays, maybe not as much since I played those games and like they have these long cinematics of guardian forces appearing and aeons appearing that take forever. But yeah, it's so interesting to me. Like I think this is now built for people who want to stream because it's more pleasure to watch and to see it unfold. I mean, I think maybe experiencing it might be different. I don't know what's your view on that? Like, would you rather watch this or would you rather experience it on your own?
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that. As I was playing yesterday, I actually could go either way. Virginia was very much a game I wouldn't mind watching because the way it's built, the way it's structured, is very much like watching a TV episode of like we said, X Files or Twin Peaks. So you want to know what that mystery, where is this mystery going? Again, there's not like we were saying before. There's not a lot of interaction, so I can go either way with this. And it's funny that you mention how first-person shooters can be boring watching, people play them. I agree, mainly due to the fact that a lot of these first-person shooters, and even some, action, third-person action games like Gears of War, or certain like Uncharted games, there's these moments where you're just watching somebody, either in an arena type area or down a long hallway or corridor. You're just watching them shoot, just like all these endless enemies. Like I would say Uncharted is probably one of the good examples of it's better. And I'm using my wife as an example. She actually liked watching me play mainly because there was a lot of action going on. There's a lot of suspense, but she akined it more to like watching an Indiana Jones movie. Um, the only problem was that she got really bored, or she didn't really care for the parts where the kind of pacing stopped, so that you were in a gunfight, because a lot of things can go wrong in a gunfight. You can blow yourself up, you can get shot, and that kind of breaks up the pace. So I think with Uncharted 4, I think they did a bit better job of that. They kind of they had these moments of gunfights, but because they included other characters in there with you, it was a little more fast paced. It wasn't as, hey, you're just gonna shoot these wave of guys and then you're gonna hit a checkpoint. You're gonna shoot these wave of guys and hit a checkpoint. I think they did a bit better job with that. But I think I do agree with you. That's the problem with a lot of action games that you see streaming, is that you're just like, okay, well, we're gonna have to sit here and watch this guy kill like 5 waves of enemies before we can advance the story. So I think I do like that they have these games like I said, Virginia and Gone Home, and even the newer adventure games like the Telltale games. Is you have that ability for people who don't especially want to play video games, or who aren't good at them, or they just want to watch the story. It's something that, yeah, you can definitely sit there and watch.